Came up with a lot of things, but how we can meet the needs, the poverty initiative, short-term needs, the food, housing, invite community into the missions, find out, identify our missions, and then invite the community. It's kind of like outreach. Utilizing existing resources. There was a Giving Matters person in our group. We've got a lot of utilizing of existing resources. We decided we've got to remove internal barriers. Look at model programs around the country that's doing things well and implement that here. Social enterprises, utilizing university collaboratives. There's Nashville, one gentleman identified the fact that there's a lot of universities and a lot of resources through young people that we need to utilize. Make it about the work, not the churches. Make it, the individual churches, and that was a great idea. Make it about the work, keep the work central. Poverty, and how do we create a focus on the poverty instead of the institutions that are coming to address that issue. Free stores, adopt a project, community coordinators in faith communities, and to identify, like, doing something, thinking outside the box. Microfinancing is one thing. New collaborations. What about new collab? Learn about needs to base projects on. Look at what needs to be done instead of us just throwing food at people. Look at what they need. Develop wish lists so that all the faith-based communities can join in. There was a great idea. One woman said, like, if we have 10 acres at our church and another church has 10 acres, maybe even hiring a farmer to work with that so we can provide food. Utilize volunteers to connect with faith communities. Make information accessible. Educate churches on needs. Advocate for those in needs collectively for more influence, and identify poverty areas and maybe triage, and instead of like waiting for a disaster in other states, triage within our own city. What needs to happen within our own city? What are the next steps? We need a list of resources and needs. And not just let this end. Come back for specific conversation on advocacy. I think that was a great idea, talking about the fact that things are changing as far as the monies that are going to be coming into people's lives from the government, and we're going to have to really get involved. Invite church representatives to the poverty initiative. We suggested also maybe a poverty prayer breakfast. Identify impediments to congregations' participation. Why are there no more churches represented today than there are, if there's 1,000 churches? And collaborative forums, and this was a great idea. Media should have been here today, because if we could get media here, get them jazzed up, then the information will go out and we'll find more people involved. And that's it. Thank you.
Oh. So in our group, we talked about 3 questions, and the last thing we talked about was next steps. Where do we go from here? And so rather than try to read everything on this these many sheets, I just wanted to talk about the next steps and some of the takeaways that we had. We had some people volunteer their resources. We had Dan Surface. Can you raise your hand? Everything that everyone said was valuable, but there were just certain things that stuck out. He has a lot of experience with collaboration and helping organizations not recreate the wheel, to create and to not replicate efforts and new innovative ways of looking at problems, and he was talking about his ability to facilitate. We also had a gentleman from the upper room there. He talked about retreat space, being able to conduct retreats to help the helpers, for lack of a better word, to help uphold spiritually and logistically what we're all doing. We talked about someone from Second Harvest Food Bank, forgot your name, I'm sorry, talking about helping to facilitate this proximity issue, that if we help plug in people from our own organizations into areas of town where basically if people from our organizations want to have an experience with poverty, want to really be able to internalize it, that perhaps his organization can help make that happen because obviously they're plugged in. Other next steps we're talking about was looking at the issue of you can't do it all yourself. Make sure that you're partnering, for example, Catholic Charities partnering with Second Harvest Food Bank, recognizing your own, what you do well, what you don't do well, and not recreating the wheel. That was something that came up a lot in our group, was not recreating the wheel and having more programs like this and not letting this kind of live within this room, both in terms of what we've accomplished here and maybe passing around these minutes, but also passing around a list for networking purposes, names, organizations, and what you do. So that we don't all walk away and say, well, it was great to meet, so-and-so here, and then never have touch with them again. Trying to look at what else. Someone brought up the idea of churches having unused space during the week. Groups with no permanent home, no building, can use this space during the week to meet. Also, maybe job seekers using a computer lab in these churches, even if it's just a couple of computers, so that they're not scrambling on computers to do their job searching at libraries, because those things are, it's competitive to get those.
Really what we took a look at was ways to meet needs, and we thought about, we talked about the basics of monetary gifts, and building our social capital and getting people involved, actually going out there and trying to find the needs that we currently have in our communities and the resources that we bring to it. And being a Williamson County church, a lot of people don't have the ties together, but we do. We're right on the Davidson County, Williamson County border, and we have a lot of calls and referrals every single week. We probably get about 12 to 15 calls a day, and that's between myself and my administrative assistant. And so we don't get a whole heck of a lot of time to do our mission work. We're more, as I was saying earlier, we're stuck being counselors. So part of what we're looking at is trying to unify our resources and some of the larger congregations like ourselves helping out some of the smaller congregations. And then also being advocates for social justice was just a huge idea that Kathy brought up, and the fact that many times our congregations just don't get out and get active. We have 8,000 members in our church. Out of those 8,000 members, there's probably 700 active people. That's less than 10% of our congregation that are really going out, getting exposed to the problems, getting exposed to poverty, and getting out of their comfort zone. And I think if we can get people out of their comfort zone, whether it be through mission work or outreach or whatever the case may be, then you're going to have a much more involved congregation. That's just speaking from not from the public service, but from the faith-based institution angle.
I'm Kathy Link with Rooftop, and the collaboration part was really big. We spent quite a bit of time on that and talking about how can we all work better together with rooftop, and I think it would work for any kind of action that we wanted to take as churches. We have very large congregations that can provide way more monetary gifts than smaller congregations, and they know that, and they may be in the suburbs where they have less walk-in traffic or less phone calls, or they don't have any kind of concentrated poverty around them. They give more of their resources monetarily, where smaller churches give more of their service because they're more in direct relation to that. So that's just a clear way to collaborate. One of the ways we figured that we talked about was maybe we could have some kind of website where, because we don't communicate with from church to church very well about the needs and what we can work together for. So a website where we had all of the churches listed, and maybe by geographical area, where you could see the churches, and if you live in South Nashville, the churches that are in that area, that maybe church leadership could meet together, and you could look at information that we get from something like this about what are the needs in your community. Who can help the most? How can we do this together? Those sort of things. We talked about, of course, we got all, monetary gifts, our time and talents, that sort of thing. There's one thing that every church can do, whether they be the smallest church or the largest. And it's something that, Reverend Barnes touched on that we don't do very well, and that's social advocacy. We can all do that. We can all stand up for what we believe in to be right. And we have a lot of core issues that have to be addressed. Things like poor transportation, low-wage jobs with no benefits, housing that people pay too much for. All of those things are things that we as people of faith can address, and we can do that in a very collaborative way. Bill suggested having, what did you call it, Bill? Interfaith.
It's right there. Interfaith action structure.
Okay, interfaith action structure, where it kind of takes some of the heat, where we would have a centralized area where people would actually look at the kind of data that we've got today and bring that in forums and programs and whatever to congregations, so that the congregation won't have deaf ears. They have to hear it. They have to know what is going on in their world, that they need to be standing up and be accountable as people of faith for. And we can all do that, and that doesn't cost a dime. So that's kind of where those are the things that we were thinking about. Thank you.